Hey, Gator Nation. Welcome back to the Respect Our Decision podcast, guys. As always, I'm your boy Hirsch, and with me tonight, just CJ the Man McCann.
What's up, guys?
Our man Wes, the hype man, is out tonight. He had some personal issues he had to take care of this evening, and he'll be back with us next week. No major stuff going on. Obviously, if you wanted to take some time off from Gator sports right now is probably the best time to do it. Not a whole lot going on. We'll let CJ give us some anecdotes on the baseball team here in a little bit, and anything you can say to make us feel better besides the words Jack Caglione at a time like this.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think I have much.
It's a rough time, but hey, we'll talk about that later. As always, guys, go out, download us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're available on all major providers. And as always, if you're checking us out on the YouTube channel, guys, make sure you go ahead and subscribe, like the video, hit the notification bell so you get a notification each time we upload new content. And if you don't mind, guys, leave us a comment down below. And in the comments below tonight, man, go ahead and tell us what position, if you could, in this transfer portal, in this spring portal session, if you could add a player that's currently out there, who it would be that would benefit the Gators. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, about what we feel like the Gators need to do or don't need to do right now with this portal window. Obviously, not a whole lot going on. We don't have a lot of room right now, but we're going to discuss all of that. But first, man, also, before I get any further, let me go ahead and make sure we always say, if you want to, if you can, if you haven't already, guys, go out there and consider joining Florida Victorious. Use code DECISION. Save yourself 20% off your first month at whatever level you might decide to join into, guys. As always, only if you can. It's one of those things. I understand, man. Financial times are tough right now, guys. Don't overextend yourself, but do realize you can designate to what sports you want that to go to, or you could just donate flat out. It supports all 21 sports programs under the Florida Gators sports umbrella. Make sure we take care of our athletes that we get so much enjoyment out of watching. All right, guys, let's jump right into it, man. Little recruiting news on the high school front before we jump into the portal. Last Friday, a few days after we did the show, we got a big time decommitment. Hate to say that, from offensive lineman Peyton Joseph, who obviously had been one of our most vocal recruiters out of the few that we have so far. Some have said out there in the Twitter sphere and whatnot that this was a mutual parting of ways. I don't know what the details around this are. I know the kid had taken some visits. I don't know if it was one of those, hey, if you take visits, consider your commitment void. I just don't know on this situation, but obviously offensive line is one of those positions that we've talked so much ad nauseum about, that you get a commitment that high, you really don't want to lose him. But there is that. And then Monday, Enoch Wangoy, our young man that is in Jacksonville now, that came from across the pond, went ahead and reclassified to the 2024 class, and is going to go ahead and enroll at the University of Florida and go ahead and get on campus. Now, a lot of people are like, I don't really like that move. It takes up a scholarship now that maybe somebody we could go get in the portal, which, like I said, we're going to discuss in a minute. Also, he's a very raw prospect. He's not going to contribute this year. It would be very, very highly unlikely. But, this is a big kid. He's 6'8". He's 315 pounds. And a lot of schools were starting to come hot and heavy after this kid. I know Auburn was after him. I know A&M had made contact with the young man. This is one of those situations I think it was good to go ahead and get him on campus. One of those stash away kind of guys, train him up, get him in our weight room, get him watching and coached up by our coaches. And hopefully you could start seeing results of him as soon as season after next. So CJ, with all that being said, man, what do you make of these moves here, and how it affects once again just the offensive line and its current unrest?
I mean, I don't know. Peyton Joseph came as a surprise because it didn't seem like he was unsteady at all with his recruitment. I don't know what happened there. Something just doesn't feel on the up and up, and it could be. It looks like he's trending towards Florida State now. Um,
Which some said was his favorite school to begin with.
yeah, and I don't know if they called him and said, "Hey, we're gonna up whatever we're gonna offer you," or I mean, we're all grown now. We all understand how college football works at this point. Florida State is a better team than we are presently, and if they have, if they're able to match or beat our offer monetarily. The kid already likes Florida State, and then you've got pretty good recruiter over there. As far as offensive lineman goes, Florida State's done a good job recruiting pretty high level offensive linemen. Um, it just it is what it is. I don't know how to fix it. I think the only way you fix it is have some level of success that you can sell. Um, you look at it. This kid is probably not going to play his first year because we're talking an offensive lineman. It's very rare that a freshman offensive lineman starts just because of, you're having to go through training, you're having to get in shape, you're still growing. These offensive linemen, unless it's just a really sure thing, can't miss guy. But it's very rare that would happen. And then to know that, hey, look, Florida isn't very good. You're not going to play very soon, and you might not even have this coaching staff at the end of the season, depending on what happens. It boils down to, we're just very easy to negatively recruit against right now. I just think we're very vulnerable, and the only way it's going to get better is by having results on the field. I think that's just where we're at. And then I think it's one of those situations where it's gonna raise the tide would raise all the ships as far as NIL donations go, as far as kids wanting to come play here, as far as coaches being more attracted to take jobs here. You're gonna have to win to have all that we want right now. And unfortunately, the season's not until the fall, so we can't really hang our hat on anything yet. I think that's a lot to do with it. I don't see him getting back into the class. I feel like there's something there. I don't. It's very rare that we take kids back after they've spurned us, and very select situations. But I don't know. I think that there's just a lot working against us at the moment, and it's going to take a good football season to really negate some of that.
And the Wangoy situation.
No, I think it's good to get him here. I think you're looking at a kid who's definitely got the talent. We talk about offensive linemen, we talk about their size. We talk about that. That's kind of what you look for: size, quickness with their feet, quickness with their hands. The technical stuff you feel like can be coached up. So this kid, to give him another year of, hey, he could play another year of high school football, or he could redshirt, come to college, and start really developing, training, getting in a serious weight program, really starting to lift weights, developing some muscle mass while continuing to grow, learning some of the tricks because the guy, again, football is not his first sport. It's not something that, this is something he's come into in the last few years. He's still learning it. So I feel like just getting him here is going to benefit all parties. I think it helps us make sure we don't have to worry about him changing his mind and going somewhere else. But you also get to get him in here and get him developed now. Like I said, him, playing a year of football, I don't think is going to really help him, especially if he's that locked in with Florida and Florida's that locked in with him. Why not? As far as all parties go, it's not like some kids have this real big loyalty to their high schools. He really doesn't have that. Is not really worried about bringing a state championship to a high school that is just kind of his foster high school. It's not where he's from, so he doesn't have any real investment in that to a hometown or anything. So I think that it just made perfect sense for him. I think this is a kid And you're going to start seeing this a lot more with the European players and overseas players that are just going to make business decisions as to possibly one day getting to the National Football League, developing as a football player. And I think this is the fastest way for him to do that.
And this is also a young man that we didn't mention is only 3 months younger than DJ Lagway. So you're talking about a young man that in the fall, I believe I read, is already going to be 19 years old. So it's not like you're taking a 17-year-old kid and putting him on college campus right now. This is a young man that's, I mean, is he going to grow some more? Possibly. But, and the school he goes to, and guys, help me online here. You can leave this in the comments if you know anything about it. In Jacksonville, the Zara Path Academy, I believe is what it's called. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong because I've never actually seen it listed before for a prospect playing there. So I'm not sure how much of a football, factory this is for this young man to get any more training or playing, what kind of competition he would be playing against that would benefit him. So once again, you're looking at a kid almost 19 years old, huge frame. I mean, so you're taking a kid that basically should have probably been in this class anyway.
Right.
Obviously, he had the credits he needed to get into the University of Florida. So at the end of the day, I see there's really no, other than the fact that he's very raw and you're probably not going to see him touch a football field for the University of Florida for probably 2 seasons, unless he just hits the ground running and just blows people away and, takes to coaching really well. And they're like, man, this kid's just a phenom. And crazier things have happened. I mean, we've all seen.
And then, too, you get the 2 years to develop the kid now, and one of them doesn't really count. So, you'll have a full, if he does develop into something, you'll have a full 3 seasons of him actually playing if you can get these couple of years out of the way. Because, he's going to redshirt. One of them's not going to count. He'll go, and again, you're talking about a freshman offensive lineman at that point, redshirt freshman offensive lineman. Probably isn't going to play again the next season.
Yeah, going to be a backup, probably see some work and blowouts.
But then he's a redshirt sophomore. He's got 3 seasons to play, and you've had 2 seasons to develop him, and one of them didn't really count against you. So, no, I don't see any negative with it.
And by that point, he's 6'8", 330 plus pounds, and he's probably a monster.
Yeah, he's 21, 22 years old.
I mean, and we're saying if everything works out. So there, a lot of moving pieces there, but hey, it's not the staff. I'm sure you're sitting here looking at it like, well, if we're not here in 2 years anyway, it doesn't matter one way or another.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's all that's really going on the recruiting trail. Very, very quiet right now for on the recruiting trail. It's about to pick up. Like we said last week, we're getting into, a lot of official visits being scheduled for June. We're not going to jump into all that right now. As it get, next month in May, we're really going to start hammering down on guys that are coming, what the realistic possibilities are for guys that are taking official visits, things like that. Right now is portal season, the last portal season that's going to affect this upcoming football season. And that's really where we want to put our focus for this evening. We had some news right as we were logging on to make this episode, and it kind of goes in line with what we were about to talk about right now anyway. And that was, we talked about him last week on the show, Penn State transfer wide receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith, literally as we were logging on, committed to Auburn. This was a kid I didn't think was a real shot anyway. I mean, every school that was out there looking for a wide receiver was on this kid and throwing around some ridiculous money. I'm sure Auburn paid handsomely. CJ, you alluded to me before we came on the air. Texas A&M was very heavily involved with this young man. So obviously, you go down a notch or two and you start talking about, well, who are guys that could come in below this? Obviously, that kid's probably going to go to Auburn and be wide receiver 1. We've already got our wide receiver number 1. We're looking for that number 2 or 3 guy, depending on how Shimmeray DK looks. Obviously you've got Khalil Jackson. You're not maybe really sold on him being a 2 or a 3. I mean, he's made some good catches. But you're looking for a kid that's got proven production on the football field. And that brings us once again to Justice Ross Simmons from Colorado State. He is official visiting this weekend. This is a young man that last season, 45 receptions, 724 yards, and 3 touchdowns as a sophomore. I mean, that's fairly decent production on a team that you're not like, well, they're not just blowing us away out here. And I believe he was only wide receiver 2 or 3 on that team. He wasn't their premier wide receiver. So you've got that young man coming in for an official visit. And there are rumors out there. I've seen a couple of different people mention this name about the Gators having interest in Arizona State wide receiver Elijah Badger as a possible name, that if maybe this visit doesn't work out, or we decide, hey, we definitely want to take 2 wide receivers through the portal, that's a young man we might go after as well. And that's a young man that had last season 65 receptions, 713 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then in 2022 had 70 receptions for 866 yards and 7 touchdowns. So a lot of proven production. CJ, what's your thoughts on, obviously, I know we've kicked this around, but, just as it starts to become a little more clear what we're going to have to do here, what's your thoughts on what we should do here with these wide receiver transfers?
We're gonna have to get one at least. Whether it's Justice Ross Simmons, him coming in this weekend, that's a guy again that we've talked about that's just different than most of the guys we have on the team. He's a bigger, taller receiver, which we don't have a ton of. So maybe that is playing a factor in what we're looking for. And if you get him, I think it's a solid pickup of a guy that's played football. A guy that's taking meaningful snaps. He brings at least some experience to the room. His numbers aren't insane, but then again, if you told me if we have a wide receiver on the roster last year that has 700 yards or 770 yards or whatever he has, we're talking about a pretty good player on our team. So if he can come in and at least come close to that, if we add him and he's a 500-yard receiver, I feel like it's worth it.
Absolutely.
I think that you're just talking. It's so hard to judge when you're talking about kids from the Mountain West. Unless they're just can't miss, like lighting it up. This kid's got 1,200 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns at Colorado State. And then you're like, okay, that guy can go. But when you're talking, a really pretty good average receiver, 700 yards is a really good production for him out there. Can he duplicate it in the SEC? I don't know. Can he duplicate it in our offense? I don't know. But I feel like I would feel better about the wide receiver room with someone like him. The gentleman from Arizona State, too, I like him. I think that would also be a good pickup. I could see a world where if we could figure it out, we'd take both of them because of just where we're at in the room as far as experience goes, just general attrition. We're still not out of the woods yet. We still, I think kids could enter the portal up to April the 30th, if I'm not mistaken. I think the NCAA said that was the cutoff. So they've got till next week. So there's no telling that we could lose a kid or 2 kids still that change their mind, especially with the staff trying to bring in other kids because our numbers aren't where they need to be to take a whole bunch. But no, I feel like as far as immediately who we have in the portal that could make an impact right now is based on our needs. Wide receiver is the way to go. I'd say, an offensive lineman, but if there's really not,
we're going to get to that.
We'll get to who we're talking about. But as far as a guy that's going to make an impact right now, I feel like wide receiver is where we need to put most of our eggs for this portal cycle, because I just feel like we need one more guy to really help take the room to another level, because, you had 2 guys last year. You had Ricky and you had Eugene. So you had 2 really solid options. This year you've got Trey Wilson and, a bunch of guys that are potential options. And I feel like at least adding another potential option helps us out tremendously.
Yeah. You mentioned like if he came in and even gave you 500 yards. Well, I think we'd all pretty much be on board for that, because you've got to feel like if Trey stays healthy, that's 1,000-yard receiver in all the different ways. If they're trying to get him the ball 10, 12 times a game, I mean, the young man put out great numbers last year, and we know how little, in at least in a lot of our eyes, how much little he was used. I mean, he missed some games. There were times where he disappeared for 2 quarters and wasn't used at all. I think this year there's no chance you see that kind of situation take shape. If it does, I think trash is going to rain from the stands at Ben Hill.
Yeah.
But you also, we've talked about Shimmeray DK, the young man. He had, I believe it was 600 plus yards receiving it with Graham the last year. Graham was at Wisconsin when healthy. I think that's a guy that's going to give you 4 or 5, maybe more yards than that. I mean, so you've got that guy. You've got Khalil Jackson, who's still, he's very you don't know what you're going to get from Khalil. He's shown the ability to make a tough catch, but can he make 5 catches a game? That's what I want to see. Can Khalil Jackson come out of a game with 5 catches for 40, 50 yards? Because I would take that production from Khalil Jackson. I'd like to see Arliss Boardingham get 500 plus yards, 600 plus yards receiving. But now you're starting to get to grounds where you're throwing the ball around and spreading it around to a lot of guys. And that's something we have not seen yet, in Billy's tenure here, whether it be because of lack of weapons or, just having to focus on the few playmakers that you had, which obviously goes back, what I'm saying right now, and not using the running back. I mean, we haven't even thrown to the running backs in 2 years, really, if you think about it. So there's a lot of production to be had, but I do think that I said it last week, you need that receiver that takes the heat off of Trey.
Mm-hmm.
That defenses are like, hey, we got to have somebody on this guy too, or he's going to burn us. He's going to put up some yards. If you're double teaming Trey or whatever you do to defend against Trey, the other guy eats the whole game. And that's where I'd like to really see us get another guy that's a proven playmaker. But you were mentioning offensive lineman, and it seems like right now with the take, obviously, of the tight end that we already took in the portal, that is the only other position we seem to be focused on, and that's taking one interior lineman. And the name, you've probably seen it on Twitter or wherever else, if you've social media you're at, and you've seen Gators talk about it, is Jason Zandamela, who was interior offensive lineman previously at USC. He's from Clearwater, Florida. He's 6'3", 285. He's visiting UCF this weekend. I don't know this week. Excuse me. I don't know. He's probably on campus there already. If not, he's going to be there the next day or so. And then the expectation is he'll be on campus in Gainesville this weekend. Nothing official on that yet. There hasn't been anybody officially announced. Okay, Jason Zandamela is officially locked in a visit with Florida this weekend. But that's where the expectation is. The third school that plays into this is Miami. Obviously, Miami's lost a ton of kids this week. That's a whole different joke for another day. But we're pretty hot and heavy after this kid. This is a kid, obviously, he was committed to USC, big time recruit in the was it the 23 class? I believe it was. He was a top 100. Yeah, he was a top 125 kid in the 23 class. So very similar to where Peyton Joseph is ranked, ironically enough. He wants to get back to Florida. That's the whole thing with this young man, is he wants to come back and be closer to home, wants to get back to Florida. Now, I don't know what he's looking for. I don't know what promises he's looking for. Obviously, this is a young man. He goes to UCF. He might have a good chance to start this year. Why is Florida looking for an interior offensive lineman? Well, I believe the word there is that they're not really sold on Damian George playing guard. I don't think he's impressed anyone. He's not living up to what they thought he would be on the inside. He obviously didn't live up to what they wanted him to be on the outside. Um, so now they're looking for another body. Now, the only thing I see being a hurdle here with us trying to get this young man, obviously, UCF's probably going to throw whatever they can at him, which is fine. It is whatever. Miami, obviously, if they wanted him bad enough, we know what Miami's willing to do to get a prospect on campus. The one problem I see is if he's looking for promised playing time, I don't think he'll get that here because you still have people like Bryce Lovett on campus. Obviously, Bryce Lovett is a guy the staff likes a whole lot. He's going to have to come in and earn it. He's not going to get promised the spot if he comes on campus. CJ, what are you thinking as far as what this young man, is this a need or just a man, it'd be nice to have?
I think it's a little of both. I think we need more. We need as much depth on the offensive line as we can have because we've seen what happens when you don't have it. But also too, he's not a guy that's probably going to start right away. I'm not saying he can't because if they say, "Listen, we're going to let you compete with Damian George through the summer, and by September, we're going to go ahead and decide what we're going to do." If that's what they sell him on, and he takes that and he says, "Hey, hey, I'm going to go compete and try to beat the guy and take his spot," then hey, you're great for him. I don't know what he's looking for. I don't know if it's promised playing time, like you mentioned. He's not going to get that at Florida. It's just not the way Billy Napier rolls. It's just especially with new kids coming in. They're not going to get promised playing time. I'm sure he will get every opportunity to start if he proves that he can do it. And like I said, your competition is Damian George. Can you beat Damian George? If you can't beat Damian George, I don't want you to play anyway. I think that's just if you're not clearly better than what we have, then eh. Can he go to UCF and start? Maybe. Again, I'm not really sure if what UCF has as far as their offensive line goes, but there's a potential there. We've seen UCF load up the war chest for guys that they want. They've done it to us. They've obviously been very active in the portal. They've added Nijak Kelly from Miami just yesterday. They added KJ Jefferson in the wintertime portal. So they've added guys, and UCF has been willing to spend. I think they added someone else not long ago as well. So they've been willing to spend in the portal. I feel like Gus knows, and especially to see a team like UCF. You're talking about it's really hard to sell kids to come play there. You're competing in Florida with Florida, Miami, and Florida State. You've got to convince them to come to UCF, and maybe it's a better strategy for UCF to really just try to get all the kids out of the portal that they can because it's going to be hard to recruit top talent, but you can definitely sell kids on, hey, you can come play in the Big 12. You can have a great opportunity to start here. You're going to be on TV. Nobody's going to miss you. You're not getting casted away to something nobody's ever going to see. This is a Power 5 program now, so they can hang their hat on that. So you're talking about a guy, especially like KJ Jefferson, who's there now. That makes a lot of sense for him to go to UCF, or we saw other guys that went to UCF and in the same respect. So I think that's going to be their plan. I don't know, exactly what they're willing to offer. As far as we haven't heard anything, I'm assuming the kid has to be there now, or had to be there, at some point today, tomorrow. I don't remember ever seeing like an exact, set number of days, but they were talking about towards the middle end of the week. So, I mean, it's Wednesday, so it's got to be right here. So we'll see how he, makes it out. I always tell myself with a lot of these, and because we've seen it so much as far as the portal goes, I'm not going to count on a kid coming here and if we can't get him to visit. If he hasn't come to visit, then I'm not exactly too stoked about him yet. If we get him to visit and we can make a pitch there, and make an opportunity, then at least you can start to kind of look at it as a possibility. But we've seen too many kids come through the door where we made early contact with them. We have visits set. Hey, they're going to come see Florida, and then they go somewhere else on a Tuesday or a Thursday, and they commit to them before they could ever get to Gainesville. So, it could be a situation like that again. So I just caution everybody to just be like, okay, let's see if we can get him on campus first before we start to even look at him as a possibility. And I think that's just the best way to be about it in the situation.
Yeah, I'm I'm very torn on the subject because obviously, like you said, we definitely could use the depth. I mean, and the kid might be really good. I don't know one way or another how good he is. I don't know what he showed at USC as far as in his limited time there. But I also know that, like I said, the staff feels very good about Bryce Lovett. They feel good about some other guys. I mean, obviously, Kearney now is one of those guys I think they're grooming for center, but could probably play guard if they needed him to. Um, you've got a bunch of variables there, but at the same point, like you said, it's just the depth alone is crucial. I don't know what the future holds for Damian George. I don't know if maybe they've already. I would imagine if the kid was transferring, he would have already done it. If that was his plan, like if they had, unless they just haven't met with him yet to have that kind of conversation, to say, look, it's just not going to work. We tried you at tackle, it didn't work. We've tried you at guard, we're not impressed with what we see. Maybe it'd be best for both parties if you went somewhere else where you were going to get playing time because it's not going to be here. Or do you say, look, we need the depth. He's an experienced player. He's played at SEC level for 2 programs now. Let's keep him around, and then you got a depth piece. I'm very, like I said, very torn on that situation. But I'm also that guy, like you just said, get as many talented offensive linemen as you can and let it shake out. But let's talk real quick for a second about, we've talked a lot about what we feel like Florida needs, but what if by whatever, first off, how do we get these guys even on the team? Because we're at 85 scholarships as of now with losing Manny Nunnery and then reclassifying Enoch Wangoid. That puts you back at 85. You're sitting at 85 right now. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, why haven't we had anyone else enter the transfer portal? What's going to shake out there? Well, the understanding I just have about it is we've got some kids that are about to graduate, and that will probably create your space. We've got some kids on this football team on the 85-man scholarship limit that probably are never going to play football. Let's just be honest about it. There's some weight that I've seen a lot of people throughout, whether it be on message boards, it's on Twitter, it's wherever, saying, why is this kid still on scholarship? And in some situations, this is exactly why. Billy's not going to, if it was the winter portal and the kid's going to graduate in the spring, Billy's not going to send the kid out. He did it with Emory. We knew Emory was leaving. But a Florida diploma holds a lot of weight in the real world. So, and everybody's aware of that. And that's one of those situations where you're like, look, let's let this kid get to graduation, get his diploma from the University of Florida, and then he moves on, whether it be to the real world or he transfers to a smaller school. Maybe he wants to play one more year. Maybe he has dreams of, well, if I go somewhere and I play and I do big things, maybe somebody picks me up in the NFL as a free agent, whatever have you not. You know how these things go. But if you have only end up with like a couple of spots and maybe you don't land one of these kids we just mentioned, then you give a couple of these walk-ons that have shown out in practice a scholarship offer. And that happens every year. You see it. A roster spot doesn't get filled for whatever reason, and they award it to a walk-on. But this gives you a little flexibility in that alley. Now, what I'm proposing to talk to CJ about here now, say we get none of these kids we just mentioned, regardless. Obviously, we'd like to have a few of them, but say we don't. Do you feel confident enough in the roster that we have on campus in Gainesville right now against this schedule that obviously we've talked about at nauseum coming into the season to at least get you to 7-8 wins?
Yeah, I mean, I do because I'd already made peace with the roster prior. I didn't expect to even entertain anybody in this portal without some major departures going on. So the fact that we even have two kids in crosshairs right now is kind of surprising. It wasn't like I fully anticipated Florida not going after anyone in the spring because the roster was full. I think they like a lot of the guys they have. I think Florida's a tough sell right now without hundreds of thousands of dollars back in your NIL to go get a high level prospect. I think the spring portal is kind of bleh anyway, especially when you're not able to get kids that are transferring from SEC programs. So you've got offensive linemen that have left A&M and offensive linemen that leave other programs within the conference, and you can't even consider them because they're you can't interconference
We
transfer.
handcuffed ourselves.
Right. So you're kind of in that position where I don't expect a lot from the spring portal. You see a lot of the same names that you saw in the fall and the winter time because those kids entered, their grades weren't great, so they spent the winter and the early part of spring getting their grades up, trying to take some other stuff to get some more credits to actually be able to transfer, especially from these lower level schools. So it's the same kids that you saw there. It just the quality in this portal is not as high as the other portal. We talked about this last year. People are like, "Oh, what are we doing? Why aren't we getting?" It just the talent isn't there. So definitely some guys in the portal, but like I said, a lot of the guys that you would want are SEC players. So you're not going to get kids from A&M, and you're not going to get kids from Georgia. You're not going to get kids from Alabama. That's just not going to happen. So we're kind of stuck anyway. I think we have a roster good enough to win 7 or 8 games without the dumb shooting ourselves in the foot things. I think that's just the way I look at it. I think this is the most talented roster that Billy Napier has had up to this point. It's the most experienced roster. We have 14 starters returning. That's one of the most in the country. As opposed to I think I saw Florida State either has I think Florida State has 4 starters returning. We have we
and,
have about 14.
and the
You know,
first time we've had a quarterback for 2 back-to-back seasons under Billy.
yeah. So you get another year with the same quarterback. He's working his second year with the same defensive coordinator. The coaching tree has largely stayed intact for all these seasons. So for better or for worse, these guys are all familiar with each other. They know what they're doing. You've added some guys in to bring different ideas to coach differently. You've added a new DB coach, and you added Ron Roberts, who's come in, and now he's kind of overseeing as kind of like the godfather of the defense. So you've made adjustments, and I think now is just the point where you've made your bed. Now you got to sleep in it. And I've just I think that was kind of where I'd come to grips with it anyway. Would I be happy adding this offensive lineman and this wide receiver? Absolutely. I think it makes us better. But like I said, I had already come to peace with. I didn't think we were going to add anybody anyway. I had kind of come to grips with what we saw, what we have already. The spring game made me feel a little better because it didn't look near as bad as last year. It looked better. It doesn't look like a national championship team by any stretch, but it looks like a team that can win 7 or 8 games and go play in the ReliaQuest Bowl, which right now is kind of all we want to see because of how bad we've been for the last couple of seasons. So no, I've kind of come to grips and I've made peace with not being able to get anybody in this portal. If we do add somebody, awesome, but I don't think adding Justice Ross Simmons and Zandamela, I don't think that they will make a difference on the team enough to add a win or 2 wins. I think Florida is what it is at this point. I don't think we have enough roster to make enough turnover to add anything else on top of it. I think that's it. I think what we have is what we have. You add a couple of guys, maybe it helps out a little bit, but I don't see players that are saying, okay, well, this guy could add wins onto our win total. It just doesn't. It's not that kind of portal cycle. We don't have the roster spots, so I think that these guys can only help alleviate some of the issues that we have, but nobody's going to cure it. The issues that this football team has, are still going to be issues in the fall. But I think that they are minimal enough to where you can get through the season with them, let kids grow up a little more, and be better off next year. I'm like I said, I think what we have is good enough to get 7 or 8 wins. I don't think adding a wide receiver and an interior offensive lineman is going to change that for better or for worse at this point.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat with you. I think we're at the point now where, like you said, that you've made your bed and you sleep in it, and by that, this is where coaching is really going to show. Your excuses of I got to get my guys, and then we've got to coach them up and develop them, and all of that has now come. This is when the flower blooms, so to speak. You've done all that. You've got the ground, dug up. You've put the soil in. You've planted the seeds. Blah blah blah. This isn't trying to get too sexual, guys. Calm down. Um, and now you're seeing the fruits of your labor. You've all the pieces are there for the most part. Would I like to see one more wide receiver in the room? Absolutely. I gave all the reasons to that. I think Aiden Mizell has a little bit more growing up to do. I think Andy Jean, either for better or for worse, has to get healthy. Could Marcus Burt be that guy that we need without bringing in a new face? Absolutely. Is he ready to make that commitment? I don't know. I keep hearing he is, but we've been expecting that for 3 years now. You would think that at this point he's grown up enough to maybe make that, but you've got to show me. And that's so many things that we could say that about. Well, you've got to show me. Austin Barber, can you stay healthy at left tackle and make a difference? You've got to show me. Jason Marshall, are you ready to try to go get paid in the NFL and show that you're a consistent shutdown corner, or, any of the things that we hyped you up to be? You've got to show me. Devin Moore, can you stay healthy? You've got to show. I mean, there's a lot of you've got to show me's on this roster. Shamar Moore, is this the season you stay healthy, put it all together, and become an all SEC linebacker? You got to show me. And you can go throughout every position group and say that about 1 to 2 players. You've got to show us. You can't do that with the Georgias of the world and the Alabamas of the world, Texas. You can say, oh, are you ready to win the big game? You've got to show me. But, this is the season where I believe the coaching is the one thing that makes the difference. Play calling, is it good and consistent for 4 quarters a game? Special teams, are we blunderless? And I know that Billy sat there with Josh Payton and said, oh, well, if you look at our numbers, we're one of the better special teams units in the country. And that's all great and well. But that's, all people are going to notice is 10 men on the field. 2 guys wearing the number 3 jersey at the same time, both being freshmen. That was coaching. And enough coaching blunders across the board loses you football games. And it's plain and simple. At this point, you can't sit there and say, well, we've got guys that are, we've got a guy that it just comes down to execution. And if we execute, then maybe that doesn't happen. No, that's done now. You've got to execute. And if you don't have 11 guys on the field that can't execute, you should be getting whatever player is causing that off the field and getting the next guy in. That's pure coaching. So Those excuses aren't gonna fly like they have before. And I know for a lot of people they haven't been flying since the beginning. And to each their own. But I've come to that, where I'm like, I don't care about these little bitty intangibles and all these little, you know, things that Billy relative twos that Billy says in these talking points. That's I'm at that point where win ball games. That's my statement for the season. I don't care, win ball games. And I don't need you to win 9, 10 ball games. I'd be great and happy if you did, but 7 to 8, win 7, 8 ball games, get that bowl game, and show improvement with a young player base, and then get me to the season after, hopefully against an easier schedule with DJ and a lot of those young guys that'll then be juniors and sophomores, and then we're going to see maybe that's growth, and that's what the fan base is waiting on. So yeah, 1 or 2 portal additions, especially a rotational offensive line piece and a wide receiver or 2. If you bring in 2 wide receivers, that alone tells you how bad the room is.
Yeah.
In the coach's eyes. So that kind of scares me that we'd even consider bringing in 2, because that tells me, holy crap, we're not in a good place. But here and we're there. We'll see what happens this weekend, guys, and we'll talk about it next week on the show. That's all we can do is just see what happens, and we're getting to that point of the year, and then we're going to start talking about recruiting, for better or worse, because right now, like we said many times, recruiting is going to be real hit or miss depending on how this season goes, and that goes back to everything we were just talking about. But games that do matter right now are what's going on with Florida baseball team. And I know CJ's had a little bit of the wind taken out of his sails, but he's also been that guy that over and over again has said, look, how fortunate we were last season, and maybe this year is just not our year. It sucks that we have to kind of be in this position in Jack's last season, but CJ, what can you tell us about the Gator baseball team and what it might take for us to host a regional at this point?
I think hosting the regional is out of the question. I think that the best we can hope for now is trying to get a 2 seed. Make the tournament. I think that that's where I'm at. Just get there and see if we can get hot at this point. Our RPI is going to help us make the tournament because ain't nobody playing a tougher schedule than us. We're playing some of the best teams. We do have a series win over Texas A&M in the back pocket that seems to help. But now you're getting into the meat of the schedule. Well, starting with Arkansas this weekend. We played Vanderbilt. We lost 2 games. We got 1. That's the main thing, is trying not to get swept here. You cannot get swept. You got to at least get one of these games. You're going to Fayetteville to play Arkansas. That is extremely tough. Arkansas is probably one of the best, if not the best team in the country, as they are every year. So you got to at least get out of there with 1 win. You cannot get swept. Then you go through the season. You still got Tennessee on the schedule. You still got Georgia, Georgia's a top 25 team, which I told everyone at the start of the season, Georgia's going to be much better this year, and they've proven that. They're a top 25 team. They've got Condon, who's, right there with Jack Caglione of who's going to be the number 1 pick in this MLB draft this season. Both of those guys are above 20, knocking on 30 home runs for the season. So you've got a really tough team coming up. Georgia just beat Clemson last night in a midweek game. 15, I think, they went at 15 innings in that game. Heck of a ball game they played. Clemson's very good. But you're talking about that. Of course, Kentucky. Kentucky's been a real surprise this year. Very good baseball team, insanely good, leading the East. They've been lights out, team that I don't think anybody had on the radar going into this season, but they've been very good. So you still got to get through those. If Florida could find a way to win 2 of those series, with out of those few that we're going to play with Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia. If you can win 2 of those series, if you could say sneak one against Georgia, sneak one against Tennessee, then you're really kind of locking yourself into a 2 seed. I think you got to win one of those series to really make sure that you're okay as far as the tournament goes. Make the SEC tournament, go to Hoover, see if you can make some noise there, help your case. I mean, you look around at the teams that have hung around, haven't had the best season, but they go to Hoover, they start to get hot, they get into that tournament, and they start to really make some noise. We saw Ole Miss do it, we saw Mississippi State do it, we saw Texas A&M do it. So there's a chance that we could do that, and that's one thing about baseball is it's not always going to reward the team that played the best the whole season. If you can get into this tournament, all bets are off. You can play ball. Florida's as talented as anybody in the country. We've got the ball players that can match up with anybody. They've just got to do a better job. I feel like that they've gotten better. I feel like the pitching is not as horrible as it was to start the season. Is it elite? No, it's not elite by any stretch. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the pitching. I think that Kevin O'Sullivan is going to have to get in the portal and find some arms. He did that last year. He got Austin Kelly, but he ended up going to play Major League Baseball, which is another thing you just have to deal with in baseball, especially with recruiting and the portal. These kids are getting offered to go play in the bigs, and a lot of times they'll take it. So you've got to keep that in mind. But Kevin O'Sullivan has proved he's not scared to go in the portal. You took Austin Kelly the year prior. You took Hurston Waldrop, who turned out to be a massive get for you. Can we do that again? That's going to be what the real story of the offseason is going to be, is getting some arms in with some experience, really using that portal to your advantage, and continuing to develop the young guys that you do have. Because we've seen some stuff from like McNelly. McNelly at times over the season has looked great. Really highly touted freshman. He looked good at the end of the game last night against Stetson.
Stetson.
Florida looks good. And if you say one thing about Florida, they've gotten better in their midweek games. We blew Jacksonville out of the water, blew Stetson out of the water. If you're looking at some high points there, that's gotten it. But it's just really tough right now because we're in the really tough part of our schedule. My thing right now, I think the one thing that I'm excited about is just enjoying the journey that we have the last few weeks of Jack Caglione playing for the Florida Gators. He's 9 home runs away from tying Laporta's record for home runs by all time by a Gator. I don't see any reason by the pace he's on he can't do it. And that's if people keep throwing in the ball.
Yeah.
I think that he absolutely can do it, but I think Jack Caglione is going to be a guy once he leaves that we look back on and say this is one of the best guys to ever wear blue and orange in any sport. He's a potential number 1 pick in the MLB draft. I mean, honestly, I don't know how you don't take that guy first. I mean, if I understand Condon. I like Charlie Condon. I think he's a heck of a ball player. I could totally understand why somebody would take him first, but Jack Caglione can just do both so well. That guy has some serious power in his bat. I just, it's going to be fun to watch, see where he ends up. Like I said, we got a lot left to play for. If Florida can find a way to get hot, get it figured out, which happens all the time in baseball. It's all that matters. Getting hot, getting on the bat. These guys can flip it. We've seen them do it before. You flip that switch, all of a sudden that ball gets to be the size of a beach ball when it's coming at you on the plate and you're just hitting everything. And, the pitching seems to have gotten a little better. I think we just need to hit better. I think that's kind of where we're at now, is just need to facilitate more runs like we were able to do last year. So, but like I said, we've got a big series coming up against Arkansas. So we're going to get into really trying to figure out where we're going to be at the end of the year. Got to see if we can make our way into that SEC tournament, win some games over there to help our case, because we don't have the wins, but our RPI is going to keep us in the hunt. So just be on the lookout. I mean, like I said, don't give up yet. Still a lot to play for. Stranger things have happened. Like I said, the talent on the team is very good. I'm just interested to see what we have. And like I've always said, this year just ain't the year. Oh well. Played for a national championship last year. You're one game away from being national champions, and sometimes it's hard to duplicate that success. You look at LSU this year. LSU's not doing so hot. They're okay. They're kind of the same level we are in. It is what it is. I think that you just cannot be playing for national champions every year, and it is what it is. I think we've done a good job. I think Sully's recruited well. I think the guys just need a couple more years to grow up, and we'll be right back in Omaha. So I wouldn't sound the alarms. I'm not jumping off the boat, but just kind of bear with the end of the season here and see if the Gators can get it figured out.
I don't think enough people realize that like you just said, LSU is in the same boat, because LSU very, very similar paths. Obviously, we're both in the World Series versus each other. They lost 2 of the 3 most talented players in college baseball in my eyes last year. In Cruz and Skeens, and they went out, hit the portal, got a bunch of, got some good ball players. They always recruit well, and here we are in the very same identical situations. To the point that us going to LSU and winning that series really doesn't hold a lot of weight.
Yeah, like at the time, I thought it was a really big deal to go there, but now looking at it, they're not great either.
And those folks take their baseball probably more serious than we do.
And they have some great players over there. I think that, that's one thing to look at with those guys having Guidry over there and Tommy White. Good baseball team. Just, again, kind of like us, just not putting it together this year.
And that's how baseball goes, man. It's just
baseball.
But
you
like
don't
you
watch
said,
it, you don't know.
Both programs could get in the postseason and get hot for a series or two, and then all of a sudden it's all bets are off.
Yeah. I mean, you string some games together. We've seen it time and time again. We watched Ole Miss and Oklahoma play for a national championship a couple of years ago, and both of those teams were dead to rights for most of the year. Neither one of those teams hosted a regional. Ole Miss didn't host a regional. Oklahoma came into Florida as like a 2 seed, beat us in our regional that we hosted. And they both played each other for a national championship. So you just have to get there. If you could get there, give yourself a shot in baseball, anything's possible.
Baseball is truly the season. It's the sport where the regular season doesn't matter a whole lot other than seeding.
It's just besides seeding, yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode. We appreciate you all tuning in. And as always, guys, CJ, anything to add before we jump?
No, just thank you guys for supporting us as creators. Check out the Twitter, check out the Facebook, check out the Facebook chat, check out our friends with Alma Mater. Use our link, buy all the cool Gator merch over there, NIL stuff, hats, shirts, all that stuff that they have over there. Check it out. Helps us out a ton. Use our code with Florida Victorious. Use code Decision with Florida Victorious. Get 20% off. Join them if you feel inclined. Help out Gator athletes. Choose where you want your funds to be allocated. They're doing a really good job over there. They've got all kinds of things that they organize all the time for their Victorious members. So, they're not just
coming.
Of course, a lot more stuff coming down the pipe. You've got football season just around the corner. It'll be here before we know it. We're about to hit the summertime, and then all bets are off. So just thank you guys so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it and helping the channel grow.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you as always for tuning in. Until next week, go Gators.
Go Gators.